Field of Glory Kingdoms, for all those who don't know about it, is a 4X grand strategy game set in the medieval era. It's a sequel to Field of Glory Empires, and just like Field of Glory Empires, it's a WeGo game, which means simultaneous turn-based. We're about to connect with Neil McKenna, who is the producer for the game from Epsom. So let's see if we can talk with him. Well, I believe that they need a few more seconds in order to just make the switch. You know, unfortunately, Neil was supposed to come here, as Marco said before. But yeah, snow got in the way. Yeah, it happens. All right, so I think we are now live with Neil. So, hello, Neil.
Hello, Alberto.
How do you do?
I can see myself on screen. Hello.
That's a positive thing. So, how are you, Neil?
I am okay. I'm disappointed not to be there. I was really looking forward to coming to Milan. I had, I think, more to do than any of the other producers. I should be not only talking about this, but about Chariots and Broken Arrow as well. So really disappointed to be missing out on what was a very big date in my diary. But here I am, so we will make the best of it.
Yeah, you know, we are very bummed down as well, but yeah, as you say, let's make the best out of it. So, can you give us a rundown of the game and, you know, how things are going with it?
Well, just as I was plugging in my headphones, I heard you saying, giving a very brief introduction to Kingdoms. So, Field of Glory Kingdoms is the follow-up to Field of Glory Empires, which released, I don't know, about 4 years ago, before I was here, certainly. A grand strategy game that was set in ancient times. Our game here, Kingdoms, is set at what you might call the birth of the medieval era. The game starts in 1054, right after the Great Schism between Western and Eastern Christianity, splitting between Catholic and Orthodox faith, an event which is still having repercussions today, you could say. There's a lot of finely poised campaigns going on at the moment. There's tension between Normandy and most of its neighbours. The Reconquista is shaping up in Spain. The Byzantine Empire is trying to fight off the Seljuk Turks. So there's a lot of finely poised power balances at the start of our game. As you were saying, we are a turn-based WeGo strategy game. WeGo is not something we do so much of, but it's one of our WeGo games. Up to 16 players can play simultaneously in multiplayer. As the map is showing here at the moment, we cover all of Europe, plenty of Middle Eastern countries, and an awful lot of North Africa as well. In comparison to Empires, we have more major nations this time. I think we have about 10 major nations, and the major nations this time, gameplay differs a lot more than it did in Empires. So the major nations, off the top of my head, England, Norway, France, the Rus, and so on, they all have very different gameplay styles. Venice too has a unique gameplay style. There's a lot of historical fidelity in the game. We've placed a premium on historical accuracy. I'm sure people will point out plenty of errors in the chat. But it's also worth noting that history here is not destiny. Normandy is not fated to conquer England, whatever happens. The Byzantine Empire is not fated to lose all of its lands. Good players will be able to achieve whatever result they intend to achieve.
Great. You know, I'm really happy to hear about this starting date because it's a very interesting period in medieval history. It's curious that you mentioned Norway because, you know, had things turned differently in 1066, maybe the King of Norway would have won the throne of England instead of William the Conqueror. All right, so...
Well, indeed, yes, and that's...
Yes. So that's one of the major turning points that history can shape up in different ways throughout the game. All right, so my first question, you know, in 4X games or grand strategy games in general, you tend to have this paint the map gameplay in which a faction starts to expand and then steamrolls and then just gets so big it basically doesn't have any real opponent anymore. So Feudal empires had a specific system to address that. I'm just wondering if you can expand on it and if you can expand on how feudal kingdoms tackle the topic.
If I was doing a sort of a proper marketing presentation, I'd probably also have mentioned that with kingdoms, we're trying to take everything that was well received about empires and build on that. We're not throwing all those things away and taking a new game. I think that one of the things that people liked most about empires was the cultural and decadence mechanisms, whereby no nation could ever get easily, or could never easily get too powerful. There were always breaks on your ability to just roll over your neighbours. More lands to control always brought more problems with you. They placed more stress on your administration and empire, and that seemed to land very well with players. So we've built on that system for the new game.
All right, sounds good. But how do you prevent this mechanic to be frustrating for a player? I mean, you want to reward a player for being successful. You don't want to punish him too hard.
Oh, absolutely. And we're not preventing people doing that. Good players will still be able to turn the map whatever colour they want to turn the map. People were able to do that in Empires, and they will be able to do it here as well. But authority is what we're calling the mechanism this time. It's, I think, probably more of an integral part of the game than it was last time. There will be the tension between your authority, your ability to control your lands, versus the amount of territory you control, because you will need to control territory in order to evolve your government up to the next size. In order to reach the correct size to grow your government and grow a more powerful empire, you are essentially going to have to grow out of your comfort zone. So there's always going to be a difficulty between seizing the requisite amount of land and being able to control what you've grabbed.
Just let me get this right. In order to grow from one step of government to the next, you need to expand your country, right? But what if you're playing as a country which historically was very powerful but didn't expand much? I'm talking, for instance, of the Sea Republics of Genoa or Venice or other examples in medieval history. How does it work then? Does the game portray that?
Well, good points indeed. We first announced the game in Venice, didn't we? Venice had some land overseas. I think we controlled part of Greece, part of what's now Croatia and so on, but not an awful lot. Genoa, I think, was very localised, but also a very powerful republic, and indeed the two republics fought for supremacy in and around the Mediterranean for many, many years. Republics evolve differently. So maritime republics will not have to grab large amounts of land to expand. Their drivers to expand will be much more commercially based.
Basically, it's a type of
for governments to evolve.
So basically, it's a type of government that allows you to build tall and play vertically. That sounds very interesting.
Absolutely, yes. As I say, we placed a premium on historical accuracy, so it would seem somewhat bizarre for Venice to take control of what is nowadays Italy. In kingdoms, we have something like 100 forms of government overall. We have a huge impact of different government styles. Many nations, groups of nations, have perks depending on their government styles. We'll touch on that a bit later on, but you'll have Byzantine pronors, French chivalry, Russian Kremlin, so on and so forth. So it would be very hard for some countries to expand. For others, it will be essential if they're to keep going.
That's great. The medieval era was famous for feudalism. So I'm just wondering, how does the game handle vassals?
Yeah, vassals are a new feature that we're bringing in here, and they are an essential part of gameplay. I mentioned that the tension between the size of your domain and your authority across it is is perhaps the central mechanism of the game. Vassals, I could probably spend half an hour sitting here talking about how it does work, but to oversimplify it, vassals allow you to control more territory than your authority would allow. So you can create a vassal and count towards your domain size, allow you to evolve your government without stretching your authority. You can also, there are some neat things you can do. You can take control of vassals' armies, for example, if they're loyal enough.
Right, very interesting. You know, there was another aspect of the medieval era which should be prevalent in a strategy game set in the Middle Ages. I'm talking, of course, of dynasties and dynastic policies. So I believe we have another video to show you. But yeah, I want to ask you, how does the game handle dynasties?
So dynasty, again, is it's a new part of the game. The grand campaign is 220 turns, each turn being a year long. So you're not playing as one character trying to seize control. You're playing as an empire. And as an empire, you are going to need a strong dynasty. A strong dynasty, the currency by which the success of your empire will be judged at the end of the campaign is legacy points. And a strong dynasty is essential to that. I can see we're showing the screen here that shows our dynasty screen. We have sons and daughters. We have wives, first of all, rather, before we get to children. We have wives and courtesans. I'm not sure there are any courtesans on screen there, poor old Henry in France. Medieval times were even less enlightened than the times we live in today. And women exist in order to produce heirs. And we have sons and daughters too. Daughters, I'm afraid, it is their lot to be married off to other nobles and improve relations with other nations. Whereas sons form part of your lineage, they can succeed you. As I say, a strong, assured dynasty will increase the value of your legacy, which come the final reckoning at the end of the game will be very important.
You know, compared to Field of Glory Empires, I see that characters now have some attributes.
Yes, we touched on that in Empires, I think, but it's a much more defined part of the game now. So all rulers will have administrative attributes, military attributes, and piety attributes. We'll come to religion on its own later on, because it's one of the big pillars of the game, but each is very important for gameplay. Each is as important as the other. Administration and military, I think, are fairly self-explanatory. They will allow you to run your empire more efficiently, make more money. Military allows you to recruit more units, cheaper cost, and so on and so forth. So the ability of your ruler is definitely part of the factor of their success as a ruler and their ability to create a dynasty.
So I just wanted to clarify one thing, because some of you might be wondering about it. In Field of Glory Kingdoms, you play as the country, you don't play as the dynasty. So this is a grand strategy game, it's not a role-playing game, although there are a few role-playing features. But yeah, you do play as a country, and in the case of what happens if you change your dynasty, if your heir gets assassinated, or if another dynasty takes over, what happens then?
Well, yes, well, the intrigue is indeed part of that. There are many, you have your wife, your courtesans, your sons and daughters, but you also have brothers and uncles as well. Once again, it's very male-centric. They can succeed you, they can be nobles to be part of your lineage. You can name them to specific posts. I think one of our new features, for example, is that you can create all these people a peer of the realm, when you can group a number of regions into a province. And by putting a peer in charge of that, that brings you various perks and bonuses as well. These people will have their own abilities, their own loyalty, their own treasury, so on and so forth.
So basically, you're saying that the charter system doesn't only revolve around, immediate dynasties and your heirs, but it's a lot deeper than that. There are other types of charters.
Absolutely, yes. It's as we say, we're not making an RPG here, but yes, you have brothers, uncles. You even have nobles who are not related to you but are powerful, and you need to keep an eye on them overall as well. All of these people will have their own ambitions, their own sort of financial incentives, so on and so forth. So you'll know something about their loyalty, but not always everything.
Personal treasuries for these characters. So what can they use this treasury for?
Well, I suppose the main thing you can use it for, they can be somewhat dishonest with treasury. They can divert it towards funding their own armies as well, which a disloyal peer or disloyal vassal ruler with his own army can obviously be quite a threat as well. Equally, a loyal, happy peer or noble with a strong army could be a very realistic candidate to succeed you when the time comes. You may not have any sons, for example, or brothers, or you may have a weak son, 2 weak sons, brothers. So managing the succession is an important part of managing your dynasty, and therefore managing the legacy, which is the measure of success ultimately.
All right, sounds great. This charter system is very interesting. So basically, what happens is that you need to watch over your shoulder for these loyal vassals, and dynasties can topple your ruling dynasty, which means, yes, you keep playing, but your country can get very weakened by this internal struggle. All right, so
indeed.
There's another gameplay mechanic that I want to mention. It represents a specific aspect of medieval era. I'm talking, of course, of religion. So, religion. How does the game handle religion, and how is it portrayed in Field of Glory Kingdoms?
Well, religion was obviously a huge part of everyday life in the medieval era, and it would not make sense to avoid that. We have 5 major religions. We have 5 main branches of the Abrahamic religion. So we have, as I've already mentioned, Eastern and Western Christianity. We have Sunni and Shia Islam, and we have Judaism as well. We also have, for added flavour, there's heretics who can spring up anywhere, including in your own territories, and there are various pagan nations as well. This isn't just, it's a fundamental part of the game. It's not just something to show. Each population in kingdoms is defined by its cultural group and its religion, which is a very important thing if you are seeking to conquer new territories. Religion is just yet another source of friction between you and your neighbours as well. So, religions running up against each other is an important part of the game.
So, depending on your neighbours' religions compared to your own, it can mean that basically you can have a target painted on your back, right?
Yes, but in medieval times, in particular. With a few obvious exceptions, religions aren't generally rubbing up against each other cheek by jowl. If you're playing as England or Venice, then you're not going to be fighting against Orthodox Christians, let alone against Muslims. So unless you're playing really in Spain or in the Middle East, you're likely to be up against nations of the same religion. Declaring war against them will cost you authority, and one of the big new factors that we have here, given that we're depicting religion, we have holy wars and the papacy are factors in the game.
A specific role in the religious game in Field of Glory Kingdoms.
Sorry?
Does the Pope play a specific role in the religious game?
Oh yes, the Pope is, as again you would expect for the time, the Pope's power is extraordinary. The papacy can, for example, declare a crusade. We'll sort of come to holy wars shortly. A Pope can also excommunicate a nation. The favour of the papacy is hard to win, but very powerful. For example, if you are one of our new colleagues in Poland and you want to declare war against Lithuania, then trying to lean on the papacy to look less favourably on Lithuania will strengthen your hand. But each region, each nation has a piety value. You can't simply tell the Pope that Lithuania, in this example, are a bunch of heathens and you should go to war against them.
What can you tell us about crusades in Field of Glory Kingdoms?
So, crusade, it's a bit wider than that. In fact, we have a system for holy wars. So Christianity can crusade, Islam can declare jihad as well, and we'll see an example of that later. This can happen spontaneously, for example, if there's a large imbalance of power between the two faiths. I think we've excuse me, I think we've seen the religion screen, which shows the balance between Christianity and Islam. We have 5 holy cities in the game. So we have Jerusalem, which then as now is being fought over by everyone. We have Medina and Mecca for Islam, and we have Constantinople and Rome for Christianity. When a holy war triggers, it's a bit like a mini world war. 2 big groups of nations can fight against each other, and conflict can expand and keep dragging in other nations until enough time has elapsed and people get sick of it, or until one of the holy cities changes hands. When a war erupts, there will be a lot of special game rules that activate. You'll be able to pass through any Christian nation in times of crusading, for example, as if you had passage rights. Equally, you might see either Crusaders or Mujahideen appearing spontaneously in neighbouring territories, in your own territory. They have their own agendas, of course, and we also have knightly orders in the game.
Yes, I'm very curious about knightly orders, actually. They were very influential in the era. I'm thinking, for instance, of the Templars. Everyone knows about them. So what can you tell us about knightly orders in the game?
Yes, I think one of the themes of the game is that everybody has their own motivations, whether they're your own potentially loyal or disloyal peers or knightly orders. Knightly orders are like power groups, almost like nations without land. They can implant over time in your own regions and create commanderies there, which they're both a blessing and a curse in many ways. They will keep you safe if you're in the front line territory. They increase your piety. They will help put down heresies, but equally they will happily draw away all your resources for their own needs. They all have their own agendas. Once the job that they have come to do is done, they may or may not choose to leave your territory afterwards.
Aren't you worried that this type of feature could be a bit invasive towards gameplay and towards the player's agenda?
Well, I think it's a realistic part of life as it was then. They're not invincible. Certainly you can limit their power. It's going to cost you authority. You can even look to have them executed, as happened against the Knights Templar with Philippe le Bel in the early 14th century. But putting Knights Templar to death may displease the papacy. That is going to make life very hard. Talked about some of the powers of the papacy earlier. You may not be allowed to join a crusade, for example, if you have displeased the papacy. And simply being a crusader will lend you authority over time. So much of this game comes down to authority.
Before we move to the last major topic, I wanted to just ask you something really quickly. How can you raise your piety? What are the ways in which you can do that?
So one of the many new features we've barely touched on today is that we have new classes of citizens and population this time. I think it's 6 or 7 classes. versus only a couple that we had in Empires. One of those classes are clergymen this time around, so they can't really convert from or to anything else. So clergymen in your region will increase your piety. But the main way of doing it, other than pleasing the papacy, is to build religious buildings. These obviously tend to be quite impressive things. We're not talking simple wooden churches or mosques here. We're talking glorious buildings that will inspire awe amongst the populace and please religious leaders. Quelling heresies as well. Heresies, particularly where you have weak piety, need putting down quickly because they can spread like wildfire. And heretics may even kill your clergymen, so they can be doubly bad for you.
Thank you, Neil. All right, so there is one last major topic that I want to ask you about. There is a small scenario, custom scenario in the game, which is called El Cid. It obviously features the famous El Cid, the Spanish hero from the medieval era. So, Neil, what can you tell us about this scenario?
So one of the complaints, I say, we had with Empires last time around was we had the huge grand campaign, we had a tutorial scenario, and that was about it. Players wanted smaller campaigns that they wouldn't necessarily have to play for the equivalent of 220 years. We have, I think, we have the grand campaign, we have two smaller scenarios, and then we have this sort of bite-sized scenario we see here, El Cid in 1087. And you can see the entire map there of Iberia. But just because it's small, it doesn't mean that there is not challenge here. So this feels like a microcosm of the complexity of relationships and the value of alliance and religion in the game. This scenario, excuse me, as you can see, is set in 1087. So this is 1 year after the Battle of Sagrajas. The King of Castile, Alphonse, had some success against the Taifas kingdoms in Spain. These were the European Muslims who ruled much of the peninsula in the time. The Taifas, in order to gain back their lands, looked to the south to what is now Morocco, called in the Almoravids to help them, and the Taifas declared a jihad. So this campaign is another illustration of a holy war. The Almoravids arrived, the Christian invaders were pushed back, and here our scenario begins.
If you play as the Taifas, won't it be a bit easy if you can just call your big brother, the Almoravids, to help you and they just win the war for you?
Well, I do keep saying that it's not just your enemies that you have to look out for in this game, you have to look out for your friends as well. There was something of a division of values between the Taifas and the Almoravids. The Almoravids thought the Taifas were too soft, too Europeanised, not devout enough. So once they get there, they push back the Christian invaders, but then realising how weak the Taifas are, or they feel they are, they start taking their lands too.
Fun. All right, so this is a three-ways scenario. So you have the Taifas, the Almoravids, and Castile.
Yeah, we're looking at making a four-way scenario, in fact, at the moment. So yes, we have the Castilians, and we have the Taifas, and we have the Almoravids, but it's called the El Cid scenario. And we are looking to make El Cid playable as well. He plays not unlike a Holy Order himself, travelling around, something of a joker in the pack, I think. So he has his own, he has no lands, but he has his own goals, his own values, and so on. So there's a lot going on this small map.
It's very interesting to hear you compare El Cid to the Joker. But yeah, I'm just wondering, so each of these factions have their own unique traits, right? That really shape the differences between them. What else can you tell us about these differences and these traits that they can gain throughout the campaign?
Well, for example, the Spanish kingdoms, the Spanish Christian kingdoms, just to be clear, have three main traits at the start. So they have the Reconquista trait, which helps them conquer back the peninsula. They get a bonus in precious authority when they conquer new regions and build fueros, garrisons in these villages. They have lots of regional decisions at their disposal. A lot of the development work which has been going on over the last year has been on enhancing the regional decision system from what we had in empires, where we had about, I think, 14 regional decisions. We're up to 50 plus now, so they're a much more important part of the game. The Spanish have many more regional decisions pertaining to the situation in which they find themselves in. And there's also a sort of cohesion bonus between the sort of various small Christian nations within Spain and Portugal, which allows the easy setup of Knights Templar and Spanish knightly orders. Another boon in the fight against the Muslim enemy. However, as we've said, knightly orders can be almost as problematic as they can be helpful.
All right. Just one last question about this El Cid scenario. So back to Taifas and El Cid, are there any more specificities about these factions that you want to share with us? Any sort of unique aspect to them?
Well, El Cid, I think, is interesting because he doesn't play like a normal faction. He roams the land like a holy order. He will have the goal, as he did in real life, of making Kingdom of Valencia his personal lands. So he has a few tools to make playing with him interesting, given that he has no lands. So he can recruit some units directly where he is, as he did. I mean, he's viewed as a national liberator hero in Spain nowadays, but he changed allegiance from Christian to Muslim in the past, and he can do that here, albeit at a cost of authority. And I think perhaps most interestingly for El Cid, he can attack without a declaration of war and just go straight in. So most of the time in a turn-based game, you need to declare war in one turn, and then the state of war exists in the next turn, whereas El Cid can just turn like that and declare war and start fighting, albeit once again at a cost of authority. It's a excuse me, still getting over COVID. It's a difficult situation for the Taifas. A lot of the they're probably an easier choice in the Grand Campaign because they get a bonus in legacy points. They can build beautiful alcazars, the fortified palaces they had. In the Grand Campaign, you can choose whether to pull in the Almoravids or not, and gain help from other Muslim nations. But if they do manage to unify Spain, then they create the Caliphate of Cordoba, which will give them a huge bonus to what they're creating. Which, within the realms of this scenario, I think it's going to be pretty difficult, but for a good player, it will be achievable.
Sounds good. Thank you, Neil. So before we wrap up this presentation, let me just ask you, is there anything else that you want to share with us today about Field of Glory Kingdoms and where we're at with development right now? What can we expect to see in the coming months?
Well, it's an interesting game because of the way we've gone about development. We showed it in Venice, which was 7 months ago now. It was sort of a brief introduction to the game. We've been working very hard on it since then. A lot of artwork has gone into the game. You saw the Dynasty screens there, for example. A lot of art power has gone into those. A lot of work's gone into creating the regional decisions. We haven't shown an awful lot of games since, so it's been very quiet. But pleasingly, we're now at a point where we are almost ready for beta. So today we are opening beta sign-ups. And we expect the beta to be available within a few short weeks so that people will be able to play it in January.
That sounds great. So anyone who wants to hop in the beta, feel free to sign up. We are looking for testers. So yeah, I'm just looking forward to seeing more of the game. Neil, I really want to thank you for taking part in this presentation. I'm really sorry that you couldn't be with us today, but there's always a time, and
me too.
Hopefully next time you will be able to get here. Just looking forward to it.
Thanks, Alberto.
Thank you, Neil. Bye-bye.